I'm a 29-year-old woman, and for most of my life, I thought my family was pretty solid. I have an older sister, Emma, who's 32. Growing up, she was the golden child. Everyone knew it, but no one said it out loud. My parents never meant any harm, but their favoritism was impossible to miss. Emma got the better everything, more attention, praise, and even financial support when she needed it. I didn't mind much back then. I figured that was just how family dynamics worked, and I didn't let it bother me too much. When I hit my mid-20s, I took a big risk and started my own tech company. It wasn't easy. I poured every bit of energy I had into it, skipped out on social events, worked weekends, and barely scraped by for the first few years. But eventually, things turned around and my hard work paid off. By the time I was 28, my company was thriving, and I was finally financially stable. I wasn't making millions or anything, but I was comfortable. I never flaunted it, though. I was just happy to finally have some security. Emma, on the other hand, wasn't doing so well. She had tried starting a boutique business, but it flopped pretty quickly. She claimed it was due to bad timing and market conditions. But honestly, she'd always been a bit impulsive with her decisions. By the time her business folded, she was in serious financial trouble. She came to me, saying she was on the brink of bankruptcy and desperately needed help. She asked for a $50,000 loan and promised she'd pay it back within 2 years. I didn't even hesitate. She was my sister, and I believed her when she said she just needed a lifeline to get back on her feet. I transferred the money to her account the same week, trusting that she'd keep her word. 2 years came and went. Not only did Emma not repay the loan, but she also avoided talking about it altogether. Anytime I brought it up, she'd brush me off with vague promises to figure it out soon. It didn't take long before her responses shifted to excuses. She started saying things like, "Family shouldn't charge each other for money," or "You're doing well, why are you even worried about it?" That stung, but what hurt even more was how my parents reacted when I told them about it. Instead of understanding my frustration, they told me to let it go. They said Emma was struggling, and since I was in a better position financially, it wasn't fair to pressure her. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It wasn't about the money, it was about the broken promise and how easily everyone dismissed it like it didn't matter. I started noticing the cracks in our family dynamic more clearly. My parents' subtle favoritism toward Emma wasn't so subtle anymore. Our relationship became strained. I pulled back a little, trying to focus on my work and my own life, but the tension kept growing. Then, one day, everything clicked. I stumbled across Emma's social media posts. She wasn't struggling at all. She had been using my money to fund a lifestyle that I couldn't even dream of. There were pictures of her on lavish vacations, wearing designer clothes, and even posing with a new car. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. I confronted her, expecting at least an apology or an explanation, but she just laughed it off. She told me I was overreacting and said, "It's just money. You can make more." That was the moment I realized Emma didn't see me as her sister. She saw me as her safety net. When I brought it up with my parents, hoping they'd finally understand my side, they doubled down. They called me greedy and selfish for ruining the family dynamic over something so small. I was done. I decided I couldn't keep putting myself in a position to be used and dismissed. I started pulling back even more, missing family dinners, skipping out on phone calls, and just focusing on my business. I thought that would be the end of it, but Emma wasn't done. My parents invited me to a family gathering, conveniently leaving out that Emma would be there. I should have known better, but I went, hoping to avoid any drama. Of course, that wasn't in the cards. In front of everyone, Emma brought up my finances, twisting the story to make it sound like I was some miser who refused to help family in need. She shared private details about my income and made snide comments about how I was too good to be part of the family now. That night was the tipping point. I realized my family wasn't going to stand by me, no matter how much I tried to explain my side. They were too wrapped up in protecting Emma, no matter how toxic her behavior was. I decided then and there that I needed to start protecting myself, even if it meant taking actions that would change our family dynamic forever. What I didn't know then was just how far Emma was willing to go and how much worse things were going to get. Update 1. After the family gathering, things didn't settle down like I'd hoped. If anything, Emma ramped things up. I started hearing from mutual friends and even extended family members that she had been sharing her version of events. According to her, I was some greedy villain who was hoarding my wealth and leaving her to suffer. She told people that I'd refused to help her during her financial struggles, completely flipping the narrative. It wasn't just irritating, it was damaging. Some people actually believed her, and it started to affect how they treated me. That's when I decided I needed to handle this seriously. I wasn't sure what my options were legally, but I figured it was time to find out. I scheduled a consultation with a lawyer to see if I could sue her for the $50,000 she owed me. The lawyer was polite but blunt, without solid documentation, like a signed contract or an official loan agreement. It would be an uphill battle. I had some texts and emails, but nothing that explicitly outlined the loan terms. The lawyer said I could pursue it, but it might get messy, and there was no guarantee of a win. I left the meeting frustrated but determined. If I couldn't take legal action yet, I needed to be smarter about this. That's when I decided to comb through Emma's public social media posts. I already knew she was flaunting her lifestyle online, but I hadn't paid close attention to the timeline. As I scrolled back, it became glaringly obvious. Right after I had transferred her the loan, she had started posting about luxury vacations, expensive dinners, and high-end shopping sprees. There was even a photo of her posing next to her new ride, a car that had clearly cost more than I wanted to think about. Armed with this new information, I decided to try one last time to resolve things civilly. I invited her to meet up, hoping that showing her the evidence might lead to a productive conversation. Instead, it turned into a complete disaster. Emma brushed off my concerns, claiming I was just jealous of her lifestyle. She laughed in my face and told me I needed to get over it. That was the final straw. I went straight to my parents to explain what had happened and why I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. I told them I was cutting Emma off completely. I wouldn't attend any family events if she was there, and I didn't want to hear about her financial troubles anymore. My parents begged me to reconsider. They even offered to repay part of the loan themselves if it meant keeping the family together. But at that point, it wasn't about the money. It was about the principle of it all. I told them no and walked away. Feeling stuck and needing advice, I decided to share my story anonymously online. I posted a detailed account of everything that had happened, leaving out identifying details and asked for advice. The response was overwhelming. My post went viral almost overnight. People from all over shared their support, telling me I wasn't in the wrong and calling Emma's behavior entitled and manipulative. It was validating to know I wasn't alone, but the story didn't end there. Emma found out about the post. I'm not sure if someone sent it to her or if she stumbled across it herself, but she decided to respond publicly. In trying to defend herself, she inadvertently confirmed several key details, making herself look even worse. People in the comments started calling her out, and her attempt to control the narrative backfired spectacularly. Things escalated quickly after that. A few mutual friends who had initially sided with Emma reached out to me, apologizing and saying they hadn't realized how bad things were. Some of them even shared stories of their own about Emma's manipulative behavior, and it was eye-opening. Emma wasn't just difficult with me. This was a pattern. As I started to regain some control over the situation, Emma decided to take things to another level. She began contacting people in my professional network, including business partners, and trying to damage my reputation. Thankfully, most of them saw through her lies, but the fact that she even tried was a new low. Realizing I needed more protection, I decided to hire a private investigator to dig into Emma's financial habits. I figured if she had been careless enough to flaunt her spending publicly, there might be more she wasn't showing. Meanwhile, I learned she had also been bad-mouthing me to my partner, trying to create unnecessary tension in my personal life. It worked, for a while. My partner and I had some difficult conversations, but once the truth came out, we were stronger than ever. By this point, the online post about Emma had gained even more traction, with thousands of comments and people sharing their own stories of dealing with toxic family members. The support was overwhelming, and it helped me stay focused on what needed to be done. I started preparing for the fallout, knowing Emma wouldn't go down quietly. The final blow came when I decided to post an update online about everything Emma had done since my initial post. It went even more viral than the first one, and the scrutiny on her behavior intensified. I hinted that I was planning a major action to protect myself, but I didn't reveal what it was just yet. I wanted to make sure everything was in place before taking the next step. This was far from over. Update 2. Emma's smear campaign against me wasn't just limited to mutual friends and family anymore. It turned out she had been trying to spread rumors about my business to potential clients, claiming I wasn't trustworthy. I found out when a longtime client reached out, confused about some things they'd heard about me. That's when I realized she wasn't just attacking me personally. She was trying to destroy my livelihood. I immediately started documenting everything. Emails, screenshots, even vague text messages from people who had heard the rumors. All of it went into a file. I also had my private investigator look into Emma's activities further, which turned out to be a smart move. He uncovered something big. While running her failed business, Emma had likely committed tax fraud. There were discrepancies in her publicly available financial records that pointed to false reporting. This opened up a new avenue for me. I consulted my lawyer again, not about the loan this time, but about reporting Emma's potential tax fraud to the authorities. The lawyer confirmed that if the evidence checked out, it was worth pursuing. I didn't rush into it, though. I wanted to ensure my case was airtight before making any moves. Meanwhile, my parents weren't making things easier. Word got back to them that I was digging into Emma's financial past, and they begged me to stop. They said I needed to be the bigger person and let things go for the sake of the family. It was clear they didn't grasp the seriousness of what Emma had done, or maybe they just didn't want to. When I refused, the guilt tripping started. They even threatened to cut me out of their will if I didn't reconcile with Emma. That didn't bother me as much as they probably hoped. At this point, their favoritism toward Emma had made our relationship nearly unsalvageable. Amid all this, Emma slipped up. During one of her angry text rants, she admitted that she had used the $50,000 loan for personal expenses. She claimed I was lucky to have helped her live her best life. I couldn't believe how brazen she was, but I wasn't about to waste the opportunity. I saved the text as evidence, adding it to the growing pile of proof against her. Things took another turn when Emma tried to drive a wedge between me and my partner. She contacted my partner directly, feeding them lies about me and my business. For a while, it worked. My partner started questioning things, and we had a brief breakup. It was a dark moment, but eventually the truth came out. Emma's lies unraveled, and we reconciled. My partner even became one of my strongest allies, helping me navigate the fallout. As if that wasn't enough, Emma was still trying to rally support from anyone who would listen. But this time, her efforts backfired. Her social circle, already wary of her behavior, began to turn against her as more of her lies came to light. One former friend of hers reached out to me, revealing even more damaging information. Emma had a history of manipulating people for money, and in one case, she had sold counterfeit luxury goods to unsuspecting buyers. This person shared receipts and messages as proof, which only added to the growing case against her. Online, the posts I had made about the situation continued to gain traction. Readers were overwhelmingly supportive, offering advice and sharing similar experiences. Some even encouraged me to take the next step and formally report Emma's fraud. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I needed to protect myself, not just from Emma, but from the damage she could still do. With everything I had gathered, I finally filed a formal complaint about Emma's tax fraud. I knew this would escalate things, but I didn't see any other choice. Emma had crossed every line, and it was time for her to face the consequences. The fallout was almost immediate. Word spread within Emma's social circle about the complaint, and even more people began distancing themselves from her. Her reputation, once bolstered by her ability to play the victim, was crumbling. The private investigator I hired continued to dig up more evidence, including proof that Emma had been siphoning money from our parents for years under the guise of loans she never intended to repay. Despite everything, my parents still seemed determined to defend Emma. They refused to believe she could be capable of such things, even as their own finances were affected. I realized then that I couldn't rely on them for support. They were too blinded by their favoritism to see Emma for who she truly was. I decided to take steps to protect myself legally and financially. I consulted a financial advisor to ensure my assets were secure and untouchable. I also made it clear to my family that I was done playing nice. They could side with Emma if they wanted, but I wouldn't be part of the chaos anymore. As I began to distance myself further from my family, I couldn't help but feel a sense of clarity. For the first time, I saw them for what they were, people who prioritized appearances and loyalty to Emma over fairness and accountability. It was painful, but it also strengthened my resolve. In my next online post, I hinted at a major action I was planning to take against Emma. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of people weighed in, urging me to see it through. What they didn't know was that I had already set the wheels in motion. Emma wasn't going to get away with what she'd done, and I was ready to make sure of it. Update 3. After consulting my lawyer, I decided to escalate things officially. I filed a small claims lawsuit against Emma for the $50,000 she owed me. It wasn't an easy decision, but I knew it was time to hold her accountable. I compiled everything I had: text messages, emails, social media posts, and even bank transfers that showed the timeline of when I sent her the money. My lawyer assured me that while it wasn't an open and shut case, the evidence was strong enough to make a solid argument. When Emma got served with the lawsuit, her reaction was exactly what I expected. Publicly, she dismissed it as a scare tactic, posting vague messages on social media about how families should never take each other to court. But privately, it was clear she was panicking. She tried reaching out through mutual friends and even sent me a message asking if we could work something out. I ignored it. There was nothing left to negotiate. She'd had every opportunity to resolve this civilly, and she'd squandered it. My parents, predictably, were furious. They accused me of destroying the family and said I was taking things too far. When I reminded them that this entire situation stemmed from Emma's lies and their unwavering support of her, they threatened to go no contact if I didn't drop the lawsuit. That hurt. But it didn't change my decision. Their favoritism had created this mess, and I wasn't going to back down. The lawsuit seemed to spark a shift in the people around us. Mutual friends who had initially supported Emma started to see the undeniable evidence piling up against her. Screenshots of her extravagant spending, her public posts, and even her past behavior became hard to ignore. A few friends who had been on the fence reached out to apologize and offered their support. It was validating to see people finally recognize the truth. Meanwhile, the posts I had shared online continued to gain traction. A popular YouTube channel that recaps Reddit stories picked up my thread, and suddenly the situation was reaching an even wider audience. The comments were overwhelmingly supportive, with many people sharing similar experiences with toxic family members. The exposure also brought more scrutiny to Emma's actions. Someone, likely a viewer or reader of the posts, forwarded the details about Emma's potential tax fraud to her employer. I hadn't planned for that to happen, but I wasn't exactly surprised. It didn't take long before Emma found out about the investigation and immediately blamed me. She accused me of trying to ruin her life when, in reality, she had done that to herself. During this time, I discovered something else that shook me. Emma hadn't just manipulated me, she had also been siphoning money from our parents for years. She'd convinced them to give her loans she had no intention of repaying. I pieced it together by looking at some old messages and overhearing a conversation between my parents. They'd loaned her thousands of dollars, which she'd used for the same lavish lifestyle she funded with my money. Despite their dwindling savings, they refused to acknowledge how badly she'd taken advantage of them. As the court date approached, Emma tried to delay the proceedings, claiming she needed more time to prepare. The judge wasn't buying it and denied her request. This seemed to send Emma into a tailspin. She began lashing out on social media, accusing me of ruining her life and painting herself as the victim. The post only drew more attention to her behavior, and the backlash was swift. Even people who had once supported her began to call her out. While all this was happening, my relationship with my partner grew stronger. They publicly defended me online, posting a clear and concise statement about what had happened and why I was pursuing the lawsuit. Their support helped win over some of Emma's former allies, who started to see through her manipulative tactics. Then came another revelation. A former friend of Emma's reached out to me with even more damning evidence of her past. Apparently, Emma had run a scam selling fake luxury handbags, convincing buyers they were real and pocketing the profits. This person shared screenshots of their conversations with Emma, along with proof of the transactions. It was yet another layer to Emma's web of lies. As the legal proceedings loomed closer, cracks began to show in my parents' unwavering support of Emma. Their financial situation had worsened, and it was clear that Emma wasn't going to help them. They finally approached me, hesitantly acknowledging that things weren't adding up. They wanted my help, but I refused. They had made their choice, and now they had to live with the consequences. By now, Emma's world was unraveling faster than even I had anticipated. She was losing the trust and support of nearly everyone around her. For years, she had relied on manipulation and charm to get what she wanted, but the truth was finally catching up to her. I hinted in my next online update that there was more to come, that this wasn't just about money. It was about trust, reputation, and security. Emma had gambled everything, and now she was paying the price. Update 4. The courtroom was packed when the day finally arrived. I was nervous walking in, but I had confidence in the evidence I'd gathered. Emma, on the other hand, appeared confident, as if she thought she could charm the judge into ruling in her favor. She played the victim, painting me as a vindictive sibling who didn't understand family loyalty. But the judge wasn't swayed by her performance. When it was my turn, I presented everything. The texts, emails, and social media posts that clearly outlined the timeline of the loan and Emma's extravagant spending. My lawyer methodically walked through the evidence, pointing out every inconsistency in Emma's claims. By the time we were done, it was obvious that Emma had no legitimate defense. The judge ruled in my favor, ordering Emma to repay the $50,000 plus interest. Emma's reaction was explosive. She stormed out of the courtroom, vowing that this wasn't over. But for me, it felt like a small but significant victory. I didn't expect to see the money anytime soon, but the judgment was a matter of principle. Not long after the hearing, the tip I had submitted about Emma's tax fraud finally led to an official investigation. An audit of her finances revealed significant discrepancies, just as the private investigator had suspected. Emma was hit with tax fraud charges, and her bank accounts were frozen pending the investigation. She was effectively cut off from her funds, and her once lavish lifestyle came to a screeching halt. My parents, predictably, begged me to intervene. They pleaded with me to help Emma avoid jail time, insisting that she was still family despite everything she'd done. I refused. I told them that Emma had to face the consequences of her actions. This wasn't about sibling rivalry anymore. It was about accountability. Things only got worse for Emma. Her employer caught wind of the investigation and launched an internal review of her conduct at work. The result was inevitable. She was fired. Without a steady income and with her accounts frozen, Emma spiraled deeper into financial ruin. Her debts began piling up, and creditors started knocking on her door. As the reality of the situation set in, my parents' unwavering support for Emma began to falter. They couldn't ignore the fact that Emma's actions had contributed to their own financial troubles. With their savings depleted from the loans Emma had taken, they finally started to shift the blame onto her. The family rift widened as my parents grew more frustrated with Emma and her endless excuses. Meanwhile, my support system rallied around me. My partner, who had been my rock through this entire ordeal, encouraged me to celebrate the courtroom victory and focus on moving forward. Close friends who had seen Emma's true colors cheered me on, reminding me that I'd done the right thing. Emma, however, wasn't finished. She took to social media once again, ranting about how I'd ruined her life and accusing me of being vindictive. But her posts only worked against her. People in her circle started to piece together the truth, and some even called her out publicly. Every rant she posted seemed to expose another layer of her deception, further alienating her from friends and acquaintances. The legal trouble didn't stop with my lawsuit or the tax fraud charges. Several creditors and former clients she had scammed filed additional lawsuits against her. It was like watching a house of cards collapse. Emma's empire of lies, built on manipulation and deceit, was crumbling faster than she could keep up. Amid all this chaos, my parents approached me with a reluctant apology. For the first time, they admitted that they'd been blind to Emma's behavior. They said they regretted how they'd handled the situation and acknowledged the damage their favoritism had caused. While I appreciated the gesture, I made it clear that things couldn't go back to the way they were. I set firm boundaries, letting them know I wouldn't tolerate any further attempts to guilt or manipulate me into fixing Emma's mess. Emma, desperate and out of options, tried one last time to manipulate me. She sent a long-winded message, claiming she had changed and needed help to get back on her feet. She promised to make amends if I would just give her another chance. I didn't fall for it. I didn't even respond. She had burned every bridge, and I wasn't about to rebuild it for her. As her social circle shrank and her legal troubles mounted, Emma became a cautionary tale. People who had once admired her began to distance themselves, seeing her for who she truly was. The golden child who could do no wrong was now ostracized, a shadow of the person she pretended to be. Looking back, I realized this whole ordeal had taught me something important. Emma's betrayal wasn't just about money, it was about trust and self-respect. I learned to prioritize my own well-being and to set boundaries, even when it came to family. In my final online update, I hinted at a final act of closure. Emma had taken so much from me, but I wasn't going to let her take anything more. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in control. Emma might have lost everything, but I had gained something far more valuable: peace. Update 5. Emma's downfall took one last dramatic turn when she showed up at my office uninvited. It was unexpected and chaotic. She caused a scene in the lobby, loudly accusing me of ruining her life and demanding that I fix everything. Security had to escort her out, but not before I documented the entire incident. That was the final push I needed to take action. I filed for a restraining order against her, which the court granted quickly given the escalating nature of her behavior. With the restraining order in place, Emma was effectively cut off from any direct contact with me. For the first time in years, I could focus on my life without the constant threat of her interference. My business flourished as I poured all my energy into growing it, and my personal life felt lighter. My partner and I grew even closer, and I started reconnecting with friends I'd neglected during the chaos. Meanwhile, Emma's life was falling apart completely. The fraud charges from her failed business led to a formal trial. With the evidence from the audit and testimonies from former clients, it was clear she had no real defense. She was officially convicted of multiple counts of fraud and sentenced to several years in prison. Her social media accounts, once filled with images of her glamorous life, went silent. It was as if she had disappeared overnight. The ripple effects of Emma's actions reached my parents as well. They were forced to sell their house to pay off debts Emma had racked up in their name. They moved into a smaller home, and while they were reluctant to admit it, they started to see the full extent of the damage Emma had caused. They approached me again, apologizing for not believing me earlier and for enabling Emma's behavior for so long. I accepted their apology, but I made it clear that things couldn't go back to how they used to be. I established firm boundaries, letting them know that I wouldn't tolerate any favoritism or manipulation moving forward. They seemed to understand, and over time, our relationship began to heal, though it would never fully recover. As the dust settled, my Reddit thread continued to gain traction. It became one of the most upvoted posts in the subreddit's history, with thousands of comments from people praising my perseverance and sharing their own stories of dealing with toxic family members. Some even said my journey inspired them to take control of their own situations. It was surreal to see how far-reaching the impact of my story had become. Through the grapevine, I heard that Emma was now living with a friend, working a minimum wage job, and estranged from nearly everyone she once knew. The woman who had once flaunted her wealth and manipulated everyone around her was now starting over at rock bottom. It was hard to feel anything for her at that point. She had made her choices, and now she was facing the consequences. For me, this ordeal became a turning point. I reflected on everything that had happened and realized how much I had grown. Emma's betrayal had been painful, but it had also taught me to stand up for myself and to value my own well-being above toxic family dynamics. I made a promise to myself that I would never let anyone take advantage of me again. My parents, for their part, began making small but significant efforts to rebuild trust with me. They showed genuine remorse for their past actions and started prioritizing fairness in their interactions with me. While I appreciated their efforts, I knew our relationship would always carry some scars. Still, it was progress, and I was willing to meet them halfway. On a personal note, my partner and I reached a new milestone in our relationship. Their unwavering support throughout this ordeal had been a source of strength for me, and I realized I couldn't imagine my life without them. I proposed, and they said yes. It was a bright moment in a long, dark chapter, and it felt like a sign that better days were ahead. When Emma's sentencing hearing came around, I decided not to attend. There was nothing left to gain from being there. She was already facing the consequences of her actions, and I had moved on. For me, the closure wasn't about watching her be punished. It was about reclaiming my life and building something better for myself. Emma was sentenced to several years in prison. It was the final nail in the coffin of her influence over our family. With her out of the picture, the tension in our family dynamics eased significantly. My parents, now removed from Emma's manipulative grip, began focusing on repairing their relationship with me. As I wrote my final update on Reddit, I thanked everyone who had followed my story and offered advice and support along the way. The experience had been a roller coaster, but it had also been transformative. I shared how I was focusing on my future, growing my business, nurturing my relationships, and finally finding peace. In the end, Emma thought she could betray me and get away with it. She cost me my family, but in the end, she paid the ultimate price. I took back my power, and she lost everything.